With SRN News, I'm Keith Peters in Washington. President Trump spoke this evening before a Washington dinner sponsored by the Susan B. Anthony List, a pro-life group. The president spoke about the importance of putting judges in place to protect the lives of unborn children.
We've appointed a record number of judges who will defend our Constitution and interpret the law as written. And we're putting onto the bench a record number of judges. And in a short period of time, we were going to have and are going to have probably the all-time record for the appointment of judges, and I'm very excited about that.
Mr. Trump has continued to get behind religious conservative groups who have supported him throughout his presidency. President Trump is refusing to say whether or not he supports Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein.
During a photo op in the Oval Office, a reporter asked the president if he has confidence in Rosenstein.
What's your next question, please?
The president, who appeared frustrated by the question, told the reporter that the visiting South Korean leader doesn't want to hear those questions if you don't mind. Rosenstein oversees the special counsel's Russia probe, and this week the president demanded that the Justice Department find out if the FBI spied on his 2016 campaign. Greg Clugston, the White House.
A man suspected of trading wild bursts of gunfire with officers during a long standoff in the Florida Panhandle was found dead Tuesday in a gasoline-soaked apartment after an armored vehicle approached. The sheriff wouldn't say whether the suspect, 49-year-old Kevin Robert Holroyd, killed himself during a barrage of bullets or if he was struck by an officer's bullet, but he said officers did hear a final muffled shot from inside the apartment before the scene went silent. He also said Holroyd doused the apartment in gasoline and tried to set it on fire. On Wall Street, the Dow down by 179 points. This is SRN News. Billy Graham's will's been made public.
The 16-page document has been revealed by WSOC-TV, and much of it is Graham's testimonial. In addition to describing his faith in Christ, the legendary evangelist says, quote, "I ask my children and grandchildren to maintain and defend at all hazards, at any cost of personal sacrifice, the blessed doctrine of complete atonement for sin through the blood of the Lord Jesus Christ once offered, and through that alone." Michael Harrington, SRN News.
A Michigan agency will, for the first time, begin processing complaints of discrimination against homosexuals. The move comes after the Michigan Civil Rights Commission decided that the state's civil rights law prohibits discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity. The panel voted 5-0 to issue the interpretive statement. A conservative legal group says it anticipates filing a lawsuit contending that only the legislature can expand such protections. This is SRN News. Paul Ryan rejects calls from critics to step down as Speaker before the midterms.
The calls growing louder after last week's defeat of the Farm Bill and a push by moderate Republicans to force a vote on immigration.
Obviously, I serve at the pleasure of the members. Those are the people who drafted me in this job in the first place. But I think we all agree the best thing for us is to complete our agenda and not wedge into the middle of the completion of our agenda divisive leadership elections.
The White House says the president sees some merit in having Ryan step down early, but hasn't reached a decision.
Capitol Hill correspondent Wally Hines. Cancer patients may find the financial recovery to be nearly as hard to handle as the diagnosis. Cancer's always been an expensive disease to treat, but now costs are soaring as insurers tighten their drug coverage and raise deductibles. Patients are ending up deeply in debt, and some are delaying care. Cancer centers are hiring experts to help patients navigate the insurance system. More details at srnnews.com. I'm Keith Peters in Washington.
From Keenan, the Shire, the Liberty Media capital of the world, this is Daryl W. Perry, host of FPP Radio News for Tuesday, May 22nd, 2018. Silver is trading at $16.60 per ounce. Gold is valued at $1,295 per ounce. Zen Cash is trading at $33, and the average price of Bitcoin is $8,178. Antiwar.com reports U.S. forces may not be leaving Iraq or Syria, but there aren't a lot of the Islamic State targets for them to hit anymore. This has led to a precipitous decline in the number of U.S. bombs dropped on those two countries and has the military's priorities shifting eastward towards Afghanistan. The Islamic State has lost virtually all of its meaningful territory, and to the extent that the group's forces have fled into the desert, they still aren't convenient targets for U.S. warplanes. In Afghanistan, the U.S.-backed government controls only about 50% of the territory, leaving open a lot of enemy territory to target. In recent decades, the Pentagon has kept Afghanistan in its back pocket for when things slowed down elsewhere. When the 2003 U.S. occupation of Iraq slowed down, a surge was announced in Afghanistan. When the war against the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria ratcheted up, Afghanistan was on the back burner, but now is facing new escalation. Unlike the Islamic State, where their control over territory was always very tentative, the Taliban has a lot of territory in Afghanistan in which they have a long-standing stranglehold and where they won't be readily displaced. This makes Afghanistan every bit the long-term project it was 17 years ago when the U.S. first invaded.
For over 40 years, Roberts & Roberts Brokerage has been a trusted source for buying and selling precious metals. Gold, silver, platinum, and palladium. They don't feed the banks. They're Bitcoin preferred and have removed the minimum purchase amount for all orders paid in the digital currency. Call Roberts & Roberts Brokerage today for knowledgeable advice on buying and selling precious metals and a forward-thinking approach to new technologies. 800-874-9760 or visit online at rrbi.co.
UPI reports Walmart topped the Fortune 500 list released on Monday, and Amazon made the top 10 for the first time. The 64th annual Fortune 500 list ranks America's largest companies, representing two-thirds of the U.S. GDP, with $12.8 trillion in annual revenue. The companies on the list employ more than 28 million people. Walmart, the number one company on the list for the sixth straight year, is the first U.S. company with $500 billion in yearly sales. The retailer closed 63 Sam's Club locations in the United States to focus on other areas such as online shopping. The closed Sam's Clubs are being repurposed as delivery centers. Amazon, the e-commerce giant run by Jeff Bezos, ranked number 8 with nearly $178 billion in revenue, which is up from number 12 with $136 billion in revenue last year. Fortune attributed the gain to an increase of $70 billion in revenue over 2 years, overseas expansion to markets like India, and growth of Amazon Web Services. ExxonMobil and Berkshire Hathaway ranked number 2 and number 3 respectively on the list with $244 billion and $242 billion each in annual revenue, respectively. Walmart and Berkshire Hathaway also topped the list in 2017.
Are you looking for a cryptocurrency that has a focus on users and usability? Then look into Zencash. Zencash has the ability to use both transparent and shielded transactions, with shielded transactions using zero-knowledge proofs. Zencash features global governance with inclusive decision-making, reliable funding for continuous improvements, and documentation and wallets in many languages that are available for Linux, Mac, Windows, and Android devices. Learn more at Zencash.com. That's Zencash.com.
Reuters reports lava from the erupting Kilauea volcano on Hawaii's Big Island flowed towards a geothermal power plant on Monday as workers scrambled to shut it down to prevent the uncontrollable release of toxic gases. It was the latest danger from Mount Kilauea's eruption, which geologists say is among the worst events in a century from one of the world's most active volcanoes. The Puna Geothermal Venture Plant, which provides about 25% of the power on the Big Island of Hawaii, has been closed since shortly after the eruptions began May 3rd, and some 60,000 gallons of flammable pentane used in the plant's turbines have already been relocated. Workers are trying to shut down the plant's 3 wells, which at 6,000 feet and 8,000 feet underground tap into extremely hot water and steam used to run turbines and produce electricity. The county of Hawaii said a berm was holding back lava flowing northwest toward the plant, and crews expected to cap 2 of the 3 wells, but were having difficulty with a 3rd well. This has been FPP Radio News. Online at fppradio.com.
The period of civil war has ended. It's definitely an improvement and totally not a lateral move. Join Ambassador Plek Dexeter and his intrepid crew as they explore astounding new worlds, discover their heroic destinies, and meet weird bug creatures and stuff. This is Mission to Zix.
Mission to Zix, an improvised science fiction podcast. That's ZYXX, launching September 6th.
A special counsel to investigate the special counsel? I'm Jackie Quinn with an AP News Minute. President Trump isn't ruling out another special counsel investigation to look into the handling of the Russia probe and his unsubstantiated claim that a spy was planted into his campaign operation.
That would be one of the biggest insults that anyone's ever seen, and it would be very illegal, aside from everything else.
A meeting to review classified documents is set for Thursday. A plea deal with a business partner of President Trump's personal attorney, who's now required to cooperate in any investigations. In Kentucky's GOP primary, a high school math teacher has defeated the majority leader of the Kentucky House of Representatives, who is seeking re-election. The body of the 17-year-old Pakistani exchange student killed in last week's Texas school shooting has arrived back home in Karachi for burial. Actor Clint Walker has died. He played the title character in the show. I'm Jackie Quinn.
Over 460 million people around the world have disabling hearing loss. Starkey Hearing Foundation provides hearing aids and hearing-related healthcare to millions of patients in over 100 countries. But they need your support to continue helping those in need. Give the gift of hearing by donating to the Listen In campaign. Go to listenincampaign.org to donate today. That's listenincampaign.org.
From CBC News The World this hour, I'm Blake Lambert. British Columbia is now suing over Alberta's turn-off-the-taps legislation. That law, passed last week, allows for the restriction of oil and fuel shipments to BC. Rafi Boudjikanian has more.
We believe that it is unconstitutional and unconstitutional on its face.
BC's Attorney General is not at all impressed with Alberta's Bill 12, allowing the latter to choke off oil shipments to BC if it keeps putting up roadblocks to the expansion of the Trans Mountain pipeline. David Eby's statement of claim says his department will not hesitate to defend the interests of British Columbians. In Alberta, there is disbelief at the posturing.
On one hand, they don't want our oil. And on the other hand, they're suing us to give them our oil.
Premier Rachel Notley is ditching a meeting with Western premiers and Northern leaders tomorrow to stay in Alberta and focus on saving the project. Pipeline builder Kinder Morgan says it wants political certainty by the end of May, or it could pull out altogether. Rafi Boudjikanian, CBC News, Edmonton.
U.S. President Donald Trump says his June 12th summit with North Korea may not happen at all. He says North Korea has shifted its tone, but Trump says he remains hopeful.
Well, we're moving along, and we'll see what happens. There are certain conditions that we want, and I think we'll get those conditions. And if we don't have the meeting. And frankly, it has a chance to be a great, great meeting for North Korea and a great meeting for the world.
Trump made his comments while sitting with South Korean President Moon Jae-in in the White House earlier today. The U.S. House of Representatives has passed legislation that would ease bank rules known as the Dodd-Frank Law. They were introduced after the financial crisis. The legislation means there's a clear path for the bill to be signed into law by President Trump. Meanwhile, Trump says he will propose new tax cuts sometime before November. That's when the midterm elections take place. Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg appeared in front of the European Parliament today. He was there to answer questions about the Cambridge Analytica scandal. But Zuckerberg apologized for how his platform has been misused.
It's also become clear over the last couple of years that we haven't done enough to prevent these tools from being used for harm as well. And that goes for fake news, foreign interference in elections, and developers misusing people's information. We didn't take a broad enough view of our responsibility, and that was a mistake, and I'm sorry for it.
However, some members of the European Parliament were unsatisfied with Zuckerberg's testimony. A few felt that he dodged their questions. Australian Archbishop Philip Wilson says he will stand aside from his duties. This comes a day after a court found him guilty of concealing child sex abuse by a priest. Wilson faces up to 2 years in prison. He is Archbishop of Adelaide. The federal government is making major changes to Canada's divorce law. It's the first major revamp of the legislation in more than 20 years, and the government says it will put children first. Here's Tom Perry.
The legislation that I tabled earlier today will help support and protect families.
Justice Minister Jody Wilson-Raybould says in divorce, children and their welfare must always be the top priority.
The amendments we are proposing to the Divorce Act will establish specific factors that courts must consider when assessing what is in the best interest of the child.
Under the new bill, couples who are separating will be encouraged to resolve their differences outside court using means like mediation. The bill moves away from adversarial words like custody toward terms such as parenting time, which are seen as more neutral. The bill lays out clearer guidelines for judges in cases where there's violence in the home, and there are increased powers to examine the income of divorcing parents to ensure proper support payments. The Canadian Bar Association says it's still examining the bill, but calls it a positive step. Tom Perry, CBC News, Ottawa.
And Stacey Abrams has won the Democratic primary in the race to become Georgia's governor. If Abrams wins the general election, she'll become the first black female governor in the U.S. And that is your World This Hour. For CBC News, I'm Blake Lamberts.
Your NBC Sports Radio update starts now.
Game 4 of the Western Conference Finals ongoing. 1:45 remaining before halftime. The Rockets have taken a 46-43 lead at the Golden State Warriors. James Harden, 22 points and 4 rebounds so far in the game. Warriors lead the series 2-1. All NBA first-team rookies have been announced. Ben Simmons, Donovan Mitchell, both unanimous selections. Jason Tatum missing, being unanimous by 1 vote. They are joined on the squad by the Chicago Bulls' Lauri Markkanen and Kyle Kuzma of the Los Angeles Lakers. Bad news for the LA Chargers. Tight end Hunter Henry will be out for the rest of the season as he has suffered a season-ending torn ACL during a drill in OTAs. Meanwhile, the New York Jets have made a trade. They've shipped 2016 second-round draft pick quarterback Christian Hackenberg to the Oakland Raiders for a conditional 7th-round pick. Hackenberg in 2 years, never throwing a pass in the regular season, only being active for 5 of 32 games. The NFL has approved rule changes for kickoffs, also ejections as well. Also, according to reports, the NFL discussing a policy for a national anthem. If you kneel, potentially, you could be penalized 15 yards. Details yet to be worked out. Major League Baseball scoreboard, top of the 8th inning. Cleveland dominating the Cubs. It's 10-0. Bottom of the 8th. Phillies trailing Atlanta 2-1. Bottom 9, Miami 5, New York Mets 1. Bottom of the 6th, Cincinnati a 6-1 home lead over Pittsburgh. Bottom of the 9th, Boston 4, Tampa Bay 2. Runners on second and third, 2 outs, though, for the Rays. Bottom of the 9th, San Diego and Washington tied at 1. Top of the 8th, Milwaukee. They lead Arizona 1-0. We are heading to the bottom of the 6th in Texas. The Rangers leading the Yankees 6-1. Bottom 6, San Francisco trailing at Houston 5-2. Bottom 6, Baltimore 2, White Sox 0. Heading to the 6th, Detroit getting shut out at Minnesota 3-0. For the complete scoreboard, head to NBCSportsRadio.com. I'm Dan Schwartzman.